To set up and sail away to faraway places with strange-sounding names is, of course, the perfect great escape and romantic adventure, taking you away from the rat race, boring political correctness, and the tedium of 9 to 5. Have boat, will travel, and it's possible at any age. Mind you, I remember my mum in her 70s saying to me that you shouldn't retire too early, Michael, as it's not all it's cracked up to be. Rather good advice, which I failed to follow, as at the age of only 50 I set sail around the world for 4 years, and on my return the medical condition of a close relative made it impossible for me to work again. So I involuntarily retired early against her excellent advice, and I agree it's not all it's cracked up to be if, like me, you have a low boredom threshold. The big barrier to long-term sailing is not buying the boat. It's having a sustainable income so that you just don't have to go to work. An income that you can live on and maintain the boat on. The concept that you can find work and generate an income as you travel, even if you're a qualified marine engineer or waitress, is totally erroneous. I mention those two jobs as they're probably the easiest to get worldwide. If you take a shore-based job, then you're selling your home to live in a houseboat in some foreign country, which is not going to allow you to clock legal into their system without proof of a livable income. I guess that at any moment in time there are around a couple of hundred sailing boats in each of the important gates to a circumnavigation. Places like Panama, New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka and the Med and so on. I bet 75% of those boats are cruised by folks with grey hair because they have a pension. Don't even think about starting a YouTube channel about your sailing adventure as a way of making money. It's like winning the lottery. There are thousands of channels out there about boats and perhaps a dozen worldwide that make a serious livable income out of it. If you're lucky enough to do a job that can be done 100% remotely, then that's perfect. Mind you, Starlink Mobile is going to cost around 90 quid a month, plus all the setup fees. Don't confuse the mobile system with the Starlink fixed system, which is much, much less. Perhaps it's better just to get a local non-contract SIM card with lots of data and a portable router as you arrive in each place. The harsh reality is also that you're not going to be a liveaboard forever. The only people who are probably those who simply don't have the funds to live ashore again. After a while, or at a certain age, it's very attractive to get off the boat. What worked for me was putting all my personal possessions into a lock-up and renting property unfurnished on short-hold tenancy agreements to other people. Yes, the law, quite rightly in my opinion, favours tenants over landlords, and sometimes you're going to get your fingers burned. However, despite capital gains tax, your property is going to increase in value over the years, and if you charge a slightly lower than market rent and behave as if the rental is someone else's home, then tenants will want to stay with you longer. Rather than use an agent to manage the property, consider asking a relative or a friend to keep an eye on it for you and pay them a monthly fee for doing this. Even in this internet age, it's essential to have a postal address in the UK with someone to receive and open your mail. Bank cards, government communications, fines and so on. The person who's going to be looking after your property can also do this. They can just take a picture of the document when it arrives and forward it to you. In order to give my minder, the person taking care of my property and looking after my address, access to cash for paying my property-related bills, I opened a second bank account with a debit card and put some money in it. For example, when the central heating or the cooker broke or needed servicing, my minder relative simply did what was required online and paid with my second bank account card, without having to consult me necessarily. Or you can pay a fee to an estate agent to do this very simple job, but they probably won't want to be your UK address or look after your mail. There are tax implications to going off in a boat, but if you talk to the nice people in the Inland Revenue and explain to them you're going sailing more or less permanently, they'll put you in touch with a special department that handles all the people who are sailing around the world and are no longer residents of the UK. There are tax advantages to being a non-resident UK, a nomad. Medical insurance is a big problem and really difficult to obtain at an affordable rate. There is an American company called Safety Wing who offer nomad insurance, long-term medical insurance, from around $60 a month, aged up to 30. Then it's around $160 a month, aged up to 69. After that, you're on your own. There's a link that'll get you a discount on the information page of this video at youtube.sailinggently.com. This medical insurance thing is a real problem. The son of a friend of mine badly broke both his legs skydiving in Asia. He was admitted to the local hospital, and the only way my friend could pay the bill for all the operations that his son had to have was by selling his boat. The other insurance you absolutely have to have is a minimum of third-party boat insurance, or you will not be allowed into any marina or boatyard. If the boat represents most of your valuable assets, then maybe you need to have fully comprehensive insurance. I use brokers like Yachtmasters Insurance, as they shop around all the insurance companies for you at the best rate on your behalf and at no extra cost to you. I have no connection with them except as a customer. There's a link to them on the video description box as well. Fully comprehensive boat insurance costs around 2.5% of the value of the boat and upwards depending on your sailing experience. There are places like the middle of the South Pacific where insurance is virtually impossible, which is a good reason not to have your entire life savings invested in a boat. There will always be bills to be paid, repairs to the boat, and local shopping. The most economical way of paying bills in currencies other than UK pound sterling is to use a currency exchange company like TorFX. I use my credit card to transfer money from my UK bank account to TorFX, and they then debit serious bills like buying a boat, boat insurance, lift out and so on in euros, US dollars, or whatever the local currency is. You get far better exchange rates than high street banks, and there are no charges. I've been using TorFX for the last 15 years, and typically bills worldwide are paid within 24 hours through them. If you use them with this code, which is also on the video information sheet, they will credit you with £50. What you do not need is worldwide boat insurance. You just need to buy cover for the area that you're sailing in. For example, in the local South Coast UK waters, the area is normally Brest in France to Elbe, which is a river in Germany. If you're heading south towards the Mediterranean, then you need to extend your cover to, say, Brest to Coruña, Spain, or maybe Gibraltar. When you get to Gib, you then cancel the previous two areas and choose Gibraltar to wherever it is you're heading. For UK residents, the big problem begins here. I'm not sure what the European status of Gibraltar with Spain is at this moment, but as a UK passport holder, you're only entitled to stay in Gib for up to 90 days. You then have most of the rest of the Med, which is in the European Union, where you can only stay for 90 days, and then you must spend 90 days outside the European Union. The non-European Union Mediterranean consists of Gibraltar, Morocco, Montenegro, Tunisia, Turkey and Egypt. Algeria is not going to allow you to enter their waters and will arrest you if you sail into their territorial waters without a visa. And you certainly don't want to go to Libya. So, sailing the Mediterranean, unless you have an EU passport, is difficult. It can be done by spending time in Turkey and Tunisia, both of which are very friendly countries, although Turkey has become very expensive and has very strict holding tank rules. Montenegro is very expensive, highly regulated, and not interested in small boats. In many Mediterranean countries, you need both black and grey water holding tanks. In Turkey, they inspect your holding tanks and give you a certificate. You must have the tanks pumped out at an authorized Turkish station that will stamp your holding tank certificate each time that you pump out. The Turkish authorities will insist on seeing this certificate every time you enter a marina, or just check in or check out. It's probably worth fitting both tanks in the UK before leaving. In Greece, the prices can be eye-watering, and in Tunisia it's difficult to obtain the parts and the skilled labour. It cost me an arm and a leg buying the parts for a holding tank in Greece last time. And that leaves the Caribbean, which in many ways is a much easier place to live aboard than the Med. Whilst there are 90 days or 6 months rules depending on how long you stay in any one island, almost every island is an independent country, and for most part they're just 20 or 30 miles apart, so it's very, very easy to move on. There are hundreds and hundreds of liveaboards anchoring free and moving up and down the Caribbean chain of islands for years and years and years. In the hurricane season, many head south to Trinidad or the Dutch ABC Islands, or head into one of the sturdily built marinas in places like St. Lucia or Martinique. And then they keep their fingers crossed that these places don't get a direct hit by a very big one. And that's what I do. And that keeps me watching Mr. Weatherman on YouTube all summer. Very good channel, and either really comforting or really scary. It's no wonder he has so many subscribers. Well worth taking a look at. In the Caribbean, boat insurance is an absolute nightmare, difficult to obtain even if you go south or west during the hurricane season. There are a couple of companies that offer insurance, full insurance, although in the case of a Category 5 wiping out a lot of boats that they cover, I do wonder if they wouldn't just declare themselves bankrupt rather than pay out. Anyway, it is possible to find cover, but for just the Caribbean, it's going to be at least 3 times what you're paying in UK waters. Even the minimum third party is going to be around double. But you need this if you're spending a night or hauling out in a boatyard. The Dominican Republic and Cuba are both well worth visiting, but sadly a cruising permit for the Bahamas is now going to cost you $700 a year. That's $500 for the cruising permit and $200 for anchoring permit, with the additional of large amounts on top of that if you want to fish or scuba dive. Scary, huh? Across the Gulf of Mexico, as all the world calls it except President Trump, there are the fair lands of Mexico, Belize, Honduras and Costa Rica, where hundreds of American liveaboards cruise happily, despite the sometimes shallow waters. These cruising grounds lead the nomad sailor down to Panama and then through the canal into the Pacific Ocean. Transiting the canal in your boat is going to cost around $2,000 plus the agent's fee for doing the paperwork. It's actually fairly straightforward, this paperwork, and I've done it all myself in Cologne. The yacht club is pretty helpful, and they'll rent you the extra strong lines that are required. And it's also a good place to find the required extra crew at the yacht club. The transit's pretty straightforward. See my YouTube video, Panama Canal for Yachts. There's a link in the description. The new big problem is that once in the Pacific, you're probably heading for Tahiti or French Polynesia, where you can get an 18-month cruising permit. Back in the day, you could break the 4,000-mile voyage to the Marquesa Islands, which are the beginning of Polynesia, by stopping off in the Galapagos Islands, which are well worth a visit in their own right. But what has happened is that Ecuador, who own and protect the Galapagos Islands, have introduced a visa for visiting the islands, which now costs upwards of $2,000 and must be applied for 6 months in advance. You have to use an approved agent who also requires paying. You should be aware that this visa only allows you to anchor in 3 places in the island, and visiting the nature reserves invokes expensive additional fees. What this stopover does do is to reduce the 4,000 nautical mile passage from Panama to the Marquesas to only 3,000 nautical miles from the Galapagos to the Marquesas. Both of these passages are the very longest you can make without the option of touching land somewhere on the way. An Atlantic crossing pales into insignificance by comparison, but the cruising paradise is arguably the best in the world. Absolutely the high point of my sailing life. So, what sort of boat do you need? Well, almost any boat that you can easily afford. One caveat is that the bigger and more valuable the boat is, the more it's going to cost to maintain and run it. I think you need to go for a sturdy boat rather than a lightweight cruiser type boat. Other considerations is how big a crew you're going to have. If you're a couple, then something between 35 and 50 foot is going to work just fine. Single-handed, there are some excellent voyages being made by under 30-foot sailing boats in the Jester Challenge, and a friend of mine is currently circumnavigating in a 25-footer, a sturdy, well-equipped 25-footer. The longer the boat's waterline length, the faster its average cruising speed will be. So, size has its attractions. On the other hand, the haul-out charges and anti-fouling costs will be higher the bigger the boat is. My rule of thumb is, can I sail and park this boat alone? I love having crew, and I frequently sail long distances with just one other person, as well as sometimes, like across the 4,000 miles of the Pacific, with a crew of 3 others, and it made life really easy. The boat I circumnavigated in was a Moody 36, with 2, almost 3 sleeping cabins and 2 heads, and it never felt crowded. The nicest boat I had was a Westerly Ocean 43 with 2 ensuite sleeping cabins, with each with their own heads and showers, but which Louise and I could sail anywhere in. We were planning to take her south through the Straits of Magellan to Easter Island and Pitcairn. I suppose ultimately it depends on what you can afford, and having purchased the boat, you still need to have at least another 10 or 15% of its price available to fit it out for long-distance sailing and get it up to scratch. Having spare dosh around to spend on repairing or just maintaining the boat really is essential. For me, a sturdy workhorse of a boat is preferable to a lightweight, go-fast charter train model. Someone who knew a thing or two about long-distance sailing said, "It's the person, not the boat." Well, look at the brilliant website of the superb sailor Lauren Landers. This young woman, in a 30-year-old 50-foot 1993 Beneteau Oceanus 51, which she did up herself, is single-handing around the world, currently in the South Pacific. She and her cat can go anywhere in any conditions. I really wish I had half her seamanship and skills. Mind you, She's a highly skilled shipwright and probably one of the best small boat sailors in the world. She makes it all look so simple, which of course it is until something goes wrong. So I suppose the perfect boat is the one that you can afford and what your required level of comfort requires. Different strokes for different folks. I'd like to ask you a really big favour, if I may. I've just started a new YouTube channel called Michael E. Abroad. It's about being an expat in France or Spain and how to buy properties and cars and boats and so on in the European Union. You don't need to look at any of the videos, as I just need subscribers to the channel. So if you could go to Michael Brandt Abroad and subscribe, which as you know costs nothing, I'd be ever so grateful. See you. Fair winds. Bye. My library of digital sailing books is at gentlesailing.com, so you can buy them as instant downloads. There's a link to a printer who can convert them to hard copy if that's what you prefer. I've just totally updated and republished French Canal Routes to the Mediterranean, which is now in its 12th edition and is fully up to date with new information, charts and pictures. Recently I published Your Boat in the Sun, which proved an instant popular success. It's about where to keep your boat in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean and the costs and the logistics involved. The Atlantic Crossing Guide has become a bestseller and it outsells most of the others, probably because it's arguably one of the most comprehensive guides to sailing to the Caribbean that's available. The Gentle Sailing Route to the Mediterranean is one of the most popular publications that I have. It describes how to coast hop all the way to Gibraltar without having to spend a night at sea. There are books about marinas in the Med, sailing in the Caribbean islands, as well as a book on simple navigation and even a Pacific Ocean crossing guide, and a book about just living aboard a sailing boat. Sailing to France with French customs explains exactly what to do in order to get your passport stamped when you arrive, and all the other official documentation. Anyway, it's all at gentlesailing.com, so please do pay the site a visit and browse through my publications if you have a moment. Thanks. Fair winds.